So we've got Jonathan Maziarz, and he's here to talk about psychological safety. He's an Agile leadership coach and product coach, currently serving as an Agile coach at Merck. He leads Agile transformations within the Merck Research Laboratories IT division and brings his wealth of experience to drive positive change and foster Agile leadership. As a certified leadership agility coach, advanced certified Scrum Master, certified Scrum Professional, and certified Agile leader, Jonathan brings a wealth of knowledge and practical experience to his coaching and training endeavors. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in biology and creative writing from Middlebury College. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan Maziarz.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I was really worried when I saw that I was up against the AI presentation, and I thought, man, ain't nobody going to show up for this. So I'm really glad you're all here. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So, I am Jonathan Maziarz. I will go over just a few more things about me before we get rolling here. I did get my start as an Agilist on the product side of the house, and it was an interesting, non-conventional way to get into this. I live right here in Lakeway, just outside of Austin. I have been unsuccessfully for several years now trying to grow bananas in my yard. You can see them there. They get big and they flower, and then we never get bananas, so it's frustrating. Merck is a legacy pharma company. We do have an office here in Austin. One of the things we do take very seriously at the office is Halloween. So if you want to join a fun group of people that are working in a very tightly regulated space, we're always looking for more folks. So a little bit about Merck. Merck is the world's premier research-intensive biopharmaceutical company. You may know us from our cancer treatment, Keytruda, or our HPV vaccine, Gardasil, or any of a number of other things. We produce a lot of vaccines, and if you have children, or if you were a child at some point, you've probably had a Merck vaccine. There's about 70,000 of us worldwide. It's a lot of people. Our headquarters are in Rahway, New Jersey, where I get to travel somewhat frequently, and it's much nicer than you would think. All right, so specifically, I work in Merck Research Laboratories IT. We support more than 21,000 researchers worldwide. And in late 2020, we embarked on a product transformation of our entire organization. We had in-depth trainings from product guru Marty Kagan and his crew at Silicon Valley Product Group. We paid McKinsey a lot of money for a 170-slide deck. We then paid Accenture even more to explain the McKinsey deck to us. And then finally, in early 2022, and after all the consultants had left the building, we reorganized ourselves into a product organization. We had 3 value teams. We had a number, probably close to 24 product lines and a whole host of products, all supporting an application catalog of more than 700 things. I'm the Agile and product coach for one of the value teams, and today we're going to get a peek under the hood at part of our transformation, namely how we made psychological safety a centerpiece of our new product culture that we're trying to build. On mouse. All right, so Swiss psychologist Edgar Schein said that an organization's culture can be divided into 3 distinct levels. Artifacts are the overt and obvious elements of an organization. These are things you can see, these are things you can touch, and these are things that we have as a pharmaceutical company in great numbers. The second thing is espoused values. These are the company's declared set of values and norms. We have these, they're published on our website: patients first, respect for people, ethics and integrity, and innovation and scientific excellence. Now, the third piece is the shared basic assumptions. This is, the beliefs we have and the behaviors that define how we work together. This is the space where psychological safety lives, and this is where we chose to focus our efforts. All right, so let's step back for a second. What is psychological safety? Psychological safety is the belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. Sounds pretty simple. And if you do get a chance at some point later, look up Amy Edmondson on YouTube. She's got some great talks about this. Definitely worth your time. So we wanted to build a culture where continuous learning was possible. But there's stuff that gets in the way. We wanted where everyone could participate safely as we worked to identify and solve business problems. But there's fear of conflict, fear of stakeholder ramifications, fear of change, fear of the unknown. How do we beat these things? We got to increase psychological safety. All right, so like a lot of other regulated industries and regulated companies, we have an SOP-driven culture. There are instructions for everything. There are even instructions for how to come give an external talk. I did not read them, but they exist. It's alarming. When you combine this with a workforce that trends toward the very tenured. When I started at Merck 6 years ago, it was weeks before I met someone who had been at the company less than 20 years. So you have SOP-driven culture, a lot of people who've been there the long time. You get this, what we call a culture of learned helplessness. People are like, just tell me what to do. I just need to be told. Very difficult to overcome. But we had a lot of other problems too. We weren't coaching each other. We weren't giving feedback. We didn't even know how to give feedback. We didn't know how to receive feedback. We weren't conducting retrospectives. And when we did conduct our retrospectives, we weren't doing a good job of following through on the actions from those retrospectives. So what was our approach? Step one was training. In January of 2023, about a year and a half ago at this point, we had a full day leadership team retreat. So there was 11 of us on the leadership team. It's the vice president, it's the head of product, it's the head of engineering, it's the head of data science, and two of our heads of customer engagement who lead our scientific engagements, myself as the Agile coach, and the chief of staff, and a few other folks. In the morning, we learned all about psychological safety from a professional trainer. And then in the afternoon, we did a series of exercises designed to test our ability to apply these things we just learned. And then beginning almost immediately after that and throughout the rest of the year, we conducted face-to-face trainings with the rest of our organization. This meant, our headquarters in New Jersey. We did some stuff here in Austin. We did some stuff in our technology center in Prague and in Singapore. We went all over the place and just let everyone know that, hey, psychological safety is going to be our focus, which takes us to our next piece of our approach, which was communications. We wanted to make sure that this initiative didn't fail for lack of communications. So basically, for every town hall, every leadership team meeting, every extended leadership team meeting, we put psychological safety front and center just to remind people, this is what we're trying to do. This is how we're trying to do it. The third piece was leading by example. We conducted experiments within the leadership team. We decided we were going to test everything out on ourselves first, see how it worked. Some things worked, some things didn't, and then we would communicate those results. We'd have a town hall, be like, hey, this is what we tried out in the leadership team for the last month or two or whatever. This is the things we learned. This is what did work, and this is what didn't work. And we said, now we want all of you to try it. And that was really effective because people knew that we'd been experimenting on ourselves. So that was really helpful. And then the last piece, the second to last piece is retrospective. So monthly as a leadership team, and then quarterly as an organization, we would do a retrospective. We would check on our progress. We would see what was going on with our psychological safety initiative as it related to everything else we were doing as part of our transformation at the time. Psychological safety was just one little piece of it. And then finally, the last piece of our approach was surveys. So we relied on our managers to gather intelligence at one level, but they would bring their own biases. So we decided, let's go directly to the people and get some information. We are fortunate that as an enterprise, we do a twice yearly survey of everyone to ask them a lot of questions about how they like working at the company, what's going well, what's not going well. And not only do they get to answer these questions on a sliding scale of 1 to 5, but they get to leave comments. And the comments are where the gold is. This is where you can really get in there and start seeing when they talk about what it's like to work here, what kind of a culture do we have, and are we building the culture that we want to have? In addition, and this is just within research IT, we employed some sense-making surveys, which allowed users to contribute a narrative about how they were feeling about things. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second here. All right, so why is psychological safety important? It allows us to learn from our mistakes. They happen all the time. We should be able to learn from them, and it should be a positive experience. It's not always the case, but that's what we're trying to achieve here. Second piece is it strengthens teamwork. If people feel safe to talk to one another, if they feel in a place where they can rely on their team members and their teammates can rely on them, team gets better. Another thing, and this is really important for us, was it encouraged interpersonal risk-taking. If you have trust and respect amongst your team members, it's easier to admit you had made a mistake or admit you don't know how to do something and then say, can you help me out? And people are almost always willing to give you that help. We talk a lot about work-life balance. This is it. We want to enable mental well-being of all of our folks because happy and mentally well folks perform better. It's just very well known. There's a good culture, people perform better. If it's a toxic culture, what do people want? They want to leave. They don't want to stay around. Which leads us to our last one here, or our second to last one here, promoting positive business outcomes. Happy people work better. It's a bottom line thing. If you are excited about going to the job and you feel like it's a good place to be, you're going to do better. And ultimately, this leads to lower employee turnover. I don't know who here has to hire. Hiring stinks. It's very difficult. Even when you do hire someone awesome, onboard them, there's everything else. Best to make your people that you have happy. All right. There's two more things we miss out on if we don't have psychological safety. First one is options. When we are confronted with a situation in which we don't feel safe, we're going to default to our things that we're the most comfortable with. That leaves out a lot of other options that we might have. Leaves out my second thing here, which is creativity. And one of my favorite sayings is that new ideas come from weak brain signals. Just that little thing in the back of your mind going, try this, do this experiment. But if that voice can't be heard because you're not feeling safe and because you don't feel like your idea is going to be heard in a well-intentioned way that it was intended, that voice is just going to get drowned out. You're just going to leave it behind. All right. My mouse is giving up. Okay. All right, so I'm going to breeze through some of these, but you'll be able to read these later when the deck comes out. So psychological safety, it's a continuum. Good psychological safety, low psychological safety. If you have a low psychologically safe team, performance evaluations tend to come just from the managers. They're not going to come from everyone. Retrospectives aren't taking place. Feedback isn't being given. You also may get all your learning just from corporate trainings. Those are good sometimes, but it's not enough. Learn from each other. When you're a psychologically safe team, you can exchange ideas, you can learn new things from the people around you. Number 3, we all make mistakes. They happen. What do we do with them? If you have a psychologically safe team, you can do positive things with them. If you don't, maybe the mistake gets hidden. Shovel that under the rug. Maybe nobody will notice. Not helpful. Again, admission of errors or lack of knowledge. Saying I don't know is sometimes really difficult if you think you should know. But if you can say I don't know and someone can give you the answer, life is good, you move on. And finally, when you are a non-psychologically safe team, changes and improvements tend to be imposed from the outside. You make a mistake, there's a root cause analysis, and someone from the PMO says, you will now do this differently. That's a way to go about it. The better way to go about it is we're on the lookout for ways that we can improve our own work. We conduct our retrospectives. We critically look at the things we do, and we share. Only possible with high psychological safety. All right, so a little bit more about what it is, and then we'll get into the good stuff, which is how did we do? So there's 4 stages of psychological safety. First one, which has the lowest level of permissions and the lowest level of respect, is inclusion safety. This is where it all begins. Are you part of the team? Second one is learner safety. This is you're now part of the team. You can engage with the team, you can ask questions safely. Third stage is contributor safety. This means you're on the team, you understand your role, you understand the roles of other people, and you understand how those roles work together, and everyone's expected to do their thing and talk to each other. And then the final one, sort of the amazing one, and it's hard to reach, is challenger safety, which is if you see something going wrong, point it out. If you want to change direction, you want to question your leadership, challenger safety happens when there's the most respect and the most permission. It's also the hardest to achieve. It's not impossible, though. All right, so if you have your team, and you'll get shared this later as well, there's a quick pulse check you can do to check on how psychologically safe people are feeling. On the y-axis, you see psychological safety. On the x-axis, you see drive. That's like how hard they're working on things. You know, if you're in a low amount of both, you're kind of in the apathy zone. Not very safe, not very driven, you're just there. If you have increased psychological safety, but not a lot of drive, you're in the comfort zone. Things are okay, you feel pretty safe, but not a lot's happening. The opposite is when you have high drive and high and low psychological safety, it's the anxiety zone. You're like looking around, what's going to happen next? I'm having to run faster and faster, but there's a pack of wolves behind me. It's not good. And again, the sweet spot up here in the performance area, high psychological safety, high drive. You want to go to work, you want to solve interesting problems, you're solving interesting problems, and you're working with a great team. Feels really good. All right. How do we create this? You got to start with the leaders. This has come up numerous times already today, but it starts with leadership. If your leaders aren't bought in, it's not going to happen. They have to be willing to do the work, and they have to be willing to not just lead the change in the organization, they have to be willing to change themselves. And that's not easy. All the incentives they've had their entire lives have gone against the things we want them to do. And now we're asking them to do something very, very differently. So we decided to put a check into place. We use OKRs to track our value delivery work. We also decided we were going to use objectives and key results to track our transformation work. So we had one objective that was covered a bunch of our transformation activities. One of the key results in there for last year was strictly related to psychological safety. How well were we achieving it? Not just as a leadership team, but as an organization. A couple other things that really help if you're going to do this. It really helps to have an Agile coach on the leadership team to be in their ear as often as possible. The second thing is if you can have distributed coaching, even if it's just through your Scrum Masters, throughout the organization. The more the message gets repeated at every level and the more the reminders can take place, the more successful it's going to be. All right, so, what did we do here? Building culture is not a one and done or set it and forget it activity. Psychological safety is created by everything you do, everything you don't do, everything you say, and everything you don't say. Everyone is watching. Your managers are watching the leadership team, see how seriously they take it. If they see real change, they're going to know that they should dedicate some of their very limited time to following up on this initiative, because this falls into that thing of squishy stuff. And a lot of times it gets left behind. I got to spend all my time on value delivery. I can't worry about transformation things. I can't worry about team dynamics. I just have to deliver. Another thing we found really successful is we brought in external speakers from time to time, usually once a quarter, to talk about this or some other aspect of our transformation, because it was really important to hear another voice, especially one that wasn't mine, because people got tired of hearing from me. Another thing you do really early on is decide what good looks like. As a leadership team, our goal was to have a fully participative team. We had a wide variety of titles from VP down to like 3 or 4 levels below that. but we wanted everyone to feel equal, and we wanted everyone to participate equally because we knew everyone had something to bring in. So we started with a really small change. In our leadership team meetings, which were usually virtual, but sometimes they were in person, one thing we were going to do is no one spoke before they raised their hand. I know it's kindergarten, but it worked. It got more people participating, and more importantly, it got some of the people that talk too much to talk less. And then finally, the last thing we tried to do, and this was really hard coming from our SOP-driven culture, which is resisting the urge and the request that we consistently got from our people to prescribe exactly how to do this. We said, look, we want you to conduct your own experiments. We want you to write your own working agreements. We want you to conduct your own retrospectives. Do these things and then see what results come from them. But we're not going to tell you exactly how to do them. Try them out yourselves. How'd we do? Well, I think we all know changing people's behavior is difficult. We tried a bunch of things. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. Now, as a leadership team, I really wanted us to have a formal working agreement. There was no appetite for it. The only piece we could get everyone to agree to was the hand raising. That was it. No one else, they wouldn't agree to anything else. They didn't want to talk about it. At other levels in the organization, we actually created some dynamite working agreements that were comprehensive and really served the purpose of things have gotten stressful. What should we do? Oh yeah, we already talked about it. This is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to act with each other when things get difficult. So those were really successful at sort of our product and maybe even our product line levels. So yeah, we got the hand raising thing down, but the spirit of it was still lacking in the leadership team. Some people continued to really like to hear themselves talk, and they continued to fail to listen with intent. One thing we did after we revisited our progress after 6 months and got over the great satisfaction we had over the hand raising thing being successful is we did realize that as people walked into other leadership teams and got invited in to talk and see how they were doing, that we actually still had a really functional leadership team, even with just that one change we had made, and that we were much better off than other leadership teams in the organization that weren't attempting to focus on psychological safety at all. So even though it seemed like a small thing, it actually had become a big thing, and we just hadn't even realized it. All right, so that's how we did as a leadership team on inclusion safety. As an organization, kind of the same deal. I mean, changing people is hard. Changing their behavior is really difficult. But our individual development squads, they were very open. So we had a lot of success with working agreements, with use of retrospectives. Do these same squads feel safe? Well, once they get outside the boundaries of the team, no, not as much. But within our org, had started to build a good culture of psychological safety. All right, so moving on, as a leadership team, how did we do for learner safety? I think this was one of the things we did the best. Were we flawless? No. Were we good? Yes. Our monthly retrospectives were very successful. We had open debates and talked about changes of direction, what the next steps were going to be, and we really made sure to hold ourselves accountable for turning the output of these retrospectives into actions in our transformation backlog. And eventually those things got turned into key results in future quarters. So I think that was really successful. It kind of gave us a roadmap where we were going to go with some of this stuff, which we didn't have before. Now, was this without problems? No. We still had on the leadership team a major HIPPO problem, which is our highest paid person's opinion was very important to them and very important to some of the other more senior members on the team. This hasn't gone away yet. We're still working on it. It's work in progress. A lot of this is going to be work in progress. Now, as an organization, I think we did even better at this. And I want to give full credit to our Scrum Masters for driving this, because they were the ones we put in charge of being the culture monitors, so it was more than just their daily job, but it was like, hey, we want you to give us a pulse check on how things are going. And they were just awesome at this. I'm so proud of them. They did a great job turning results into actions. So one thing we did successfully as an organization is every month at our value team all hands meeting, we would have what we call a learning moment. And this learning moment was something that could have come from anywhere in the org, but it was where something had gone really wrong. And what did we learn from it? And the first one we did, and it was just a miracle that this all came together the way it did. We had a vendor engagement that had gone very badly, to the tune of several $1 million badly. But we were able to present this to the whole group, say, look, we did this. This was the mistakes we made along the way. These are the things we learned. And here's how we're going to do things differently in the future. And for a lot of people that attended, they came to members of the LT afterward and were just shocked that A, that we would admit that this happened, and B, that the people that did it and were responsible for it were still alive and still employed. And that was a really exciting moment for everyone. They're like, hey, see that? It's okay. These things happen. It's not desirable, but what are we going to do about it? So that was just a great moment, and was really happy to have that happen. It's very rare that you get an honest accounting of something that goes very poorly. All right. So contributor safety. How did we do as a leadership team? We made significant gains in this space, and the way we made gains in this space was by focusing on having really clear accountabilities and responsibilities for everyone on the LT. So we did an exercise. Everyone wrote down what they thought their job was, whatever they were accountable for, what they were responsible for. But then I also did it for all the other people on the leadership team. Head of data science, here's what I think you do. Head of engineering, here's what I think you do, and so on and so forth. And then we also kind of pulled all that together and said, okay, for me as the Agile coach, what do I need from everyone else on the team? And the head of engineering did the same thing. What do they need from everyone else on the team? And with all that together, we had a really good description of what everyone's job was supposed to be. And then we said, okay, fine. This is what we agree on. We're going to publish it. So it's out there for everybody to see. So if there's no mystery amongst anyone who's in our entire value team, all 200 of us, what the responsibilities and accountabilities are of the leadership team. And this was, again, just sort of unprecedented transparency that people weren't used to, but they really liked. All right, so that was how we did as a leadership team on contributor safety. As an organization, this is still very much work in progress. We've given our managers things to do, things to think about. We wanted them to go through the accountabilities and responsibilities activities as well. And we also wanted to make sure that they did their working agreements, and they did that. And, at the end, we wanted to make sure that people could come forward in these teams and speak their mind. Is it happening in some ways? Yes. But in some ways, there's still a lot left to do. All right. Moving on to challenger safety. All right. So yeah, it's the final frontier. I've experienced this once, and it was a team that we had a great VP, gave us clear instructions about what problems he wanted us to solve, and then he just let us go off and solve them. We could bring problems to him, and that was fine, and he would remove roadblocks for us. It was amazing. This happened once several years ago. I've yet to get back to this point where it can happen. So this remains the Holy Grail. We're still reaching for it, both as a leadership team and as an organization, but it's out there. Now, so one other thing to say about challenger safety is, in order for this to work, and this is something we've realized within the leadership team, is we still have a lot of work to do amongst most of the people on the team as far as how self-aware they are. There is a great shortage of it amongst especially our senior leaders, this self-awareness. So they don't realize how they come off. They don't realize the face they make when you bring them a question or an issue. We're working on that. Some of them Some of them received 360s last year as part of their development, and a lot of them received this feedback as part of their 360s that they weren't particularly self-aware. This was challenging for them to hear, and some of them still haven't accepted it yet. But again, this is where we know the work needs to take place. All right, so, and then finally, how have we done as an organization on challenger safety? So my ideal in the future is that we have a learning moment that isn't just confessional, like, hey, this got screwed up, we broke it, it didn't work, and we fixed it. What I want is a learning moment where someone challenged a leader to do something differently, and they survived. Waiting for this example to come up, haven't found one yet, still remain hopeful, but still waiting. Work in progress, for sure. Okay. How do we grow psychological safety? I'm going to breeze through a few of these here because there's a lot to cover. Creating psychological safety is a journey. It can't be created overnight. It does not come from following a recipe. There's no step-by-step thing, but there are some things that you can do, and there's some stuff that you can do right away. First thing, and this is going to sound obvious, use active listening. I won't go into details about what it is right now. You all pretty much know what it is, or you can read about it online, but it's really important. And it's listening with intent. It's listening not to respond, but to hear. Second thing is to understand other people's perspectives. This is where the self-awareness comes in, that you can put yourself in someone else's shoes, see the world as they see it. Third thing here is to transform difficult conversations. One of the things we like to do is do a separate training on what we call catalyst conversations, so that ways that people can have a difficult conversation in a way that's as less painful as possible, because it creates a space that's psychologically safe where an open exchange of ideas can take place. We'll cover that, maybe at a future one of these, but it's a great thing to do. And then just moving on here, be inclusive in interpersonal settings. And there's a whole list of things we can do here. Can't go over all of them now, but you'll get to see some of these links when the deck comes out later. The ones I'm going to highlight in the short run here. First one is the stinky fish exercise. This is a great way to surface the things that are going on in your team that no one's talking about, but that need to be talked about. Second thing I want to highlight on here is 1, 2, 4, all. It is a facilitation technique for generating a lot of different opinions and ideas about something and then bringing it all together into a group. It is part of liberating structures, and if you're not familiar with those, check those out online as well. There's a whole website of facilitation techniques there that will change your life. And then the last thing I want to point out here is integration. If you aren't familiar with the work of Mary Parker Follett, she's generally known as the mother of modern management. She's an early 20th century thinker on all this stuff. My favorite thing about some of her writings is she talks about the 4 outcomes of conflict. And there's submission, where you give up. There's struggle, where you fight. There's compromise, which is the one we hear about a lot, which is you give up a little, I give up a little. But then she goes one step further, and she has one that's just called integration, which is a little different than compromise. It's not that we're both giving something up. We're both changing how we think about the issue at hand. And it's slightly different and kind of amazing. Totally recommend reading about that as well. All right. How do we measure psychological safety? This, getting near the end here, this is good. So, empathy. Keep that top of mind. This is the thing we're trying to measure. I talked a little bit about the enterprise survey that we do that lets people leave the comments and answer the questions. Great stuff. And here's some of the questions that we've asked recently. So, under which circumstances or for what reasons do you not feel free to speak your mind? We ask them very specifically. Are you able to speak your mind freely? We ask them, do your leaders value different perspectives? We ask them, do you feel satisfied with the recognition or praise you receive for your work? And we ask them, do they feel empowered to make decisions regarding their work? And by the answers to those questions and the especially in the comments we get a nice picture of how psychologically safe the organization is. And then the last piece here, talk a little bit about sense making if you're not familiar with it. And yeah, ultimately it's the ability to make sense of what is an ambiguous situation. And any transformation activity is an ambiguous situation. There's all these parts moving in different directions. You're trying to pull it together and get a sense of what's going on. And ultimately, sense making is an attempt to get back to the people that are behind your surveys, the people that are on your teams. Again, we want to remember that it's people that are doing all this stuff. And we want to get more out of them than just a 1 to 5 answer on something. So the question we ask is, imagine that you meet a trusted colleague in another part of the organization, and that person asks you, how are things going? Tell me about how things have gone on your team in the past year. We ask them to give a little narrative about that, to answer that question. We ask them to give a title to the narrative, and the titles are sometimes hilarious. Some of the titles that are very good or very bad, it's like, I wish I was dead, or this is the greatest thing ever. So the titles can be really interesting summaries of what people say. And then we also ask them to associate an emotion with their story. So it's either very positive, sort of positive, neutral, kind of negative, or super negative. And that lets us draw a nice picture of how people are feeling. Because you can read the narrative, and I'm like, wow, that sounds really awful. And then the person's like, generally positive. I was like, what does a bad day look like for this person? All right, so yeah, sense making, really great thing. You can definitely, there's a link here to click and read more about it as well. All right, so you can read some of the stuff that was good and some of the stuff that wasn't later on. Now, some of the stuff that was good, respect, pay it forward. We had this one crazy person who said, landing a full-time job at Merck is a dream come true. Everything is perfect. And I thank the universe for the blessing. I'm like, I want to know who that is. I want them on my team. But then some of the stuff that was bad was, it's not so good. And one of the things that I saw in here immediately that kind of bummed me out, because I felt like we were doing this well, which was they didn't see small wins being celebrated, which I thought we were trying to do better, but I guess hadn't reached this person yet. And then finally, we got some really good data on our retrospectives. About a third of the people, if we round up, thought that the retrospectives were actually helping them deliver value more quickly and better. 60% of people said they weren't happening often enough. And we all know this, that when the going gets tough, what's the first thing that gets dropped from the calendar? The retrospective. We don't have time for that. Let's not do it. And only 10% of people said that their retrospectives were unproductive due to a lack of psychological safety. So I thought that was a win right there. All right. So bad news. Most transformations fail. We all know this. We've all been part of them. I worked at a different company where we reorganized routinely every 18 months for the entire 7 years I was there. It was misery, just misery. I'm hoping that ours isn't going to fail. It's still a work in progress right now. I know we're kind of running short on time, so I'm going to skip some of these bits here about why things fail. But I will just, again, point to these last two on this list, which is failing to create short-term wins and then publicizing the heck out of them, and declaring victory too soon. Saying, I think we're good. Everything looks good. Everybody good. Let's go. Okay. I'm a little worried that that last one's going to happen to us because we're kind of did a bit of a change in the wind this year about how much emphasis is getting placed on psychological safety, the value of transformation, some of the other things we're trying to do to build culture. And there's been this redoubled focus on delivery. Jury's still out on what's going to happen on this one. So what can you do tomorrow? You want to go sell this to your leaders. Bring up this list of outcomes. They're going to want these things. They can only have these things if they have a psychologically safe organization. It enables all of this. And there's stuff that they're going to need to do. They're going to need to learn empathy. They're going to need to learn self-awareness. They're going to need to be open to learning. They're going to have to be focused on the outcomes that they want. And they're going to have to embrace improvement. The only way it's going to happen. And y'all should read this book, and you should encourage all of your leaders to read this book, because this is a book that talks about If you're not familiar with it, submarine captain who at the last moment gets changed from one kind of submarine to a completely different kind of submarine that he knows nothing about. Most complicated machine on Earth, a nuclear submarine. He's given a brand new one to be the commander of, and he has to convince his crew to trust him, and that he can trust them. How do they build that psychological safety? It's a great journey, worth reading. All right, so we're going to wrap it up here with Mr. Rogers, because this is a man who's done more than anyone on Earth to build psychological safety. So, as human beings, our job in life is to help people realize how rare and valuable each one of us really is. That each of us has something that no one else has or ever will have, something inside that is unique to all time. It is our job to encourage each other to discover that uniqueness and provide ways of developing its expression. Psychological safety from Mr. Rogers. Good stuff. That's it. Thank you. Got 5 minutes for questions. Any hands in the room? Do we have any online?
I don't have any online questions yet, but just a call out to our virtual attendees. If you do have a question, send it in via the chat and I'll read it out loud with the microphone so everyone can hear it. But for now, I'll turn it over to the people we have here. If you guys have any questions, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes.
All the time.
Jonathan, could you repeat the question, please?
So the question was whether I had personally pushed back against the status quo. And that's pretty much my job as the coach, to push the leadership team in a different direction than they would naturally want to go. It's sometimes successful, sometimes it's not, but yeah.
I don't, oh, go ahead.
So yes, I've got a whole bunch of questions and I can definitely share those with you. All the results are open to interpretation. And what I like to do when I get the results back from one of these, I may have 300 or 400 different lines. I'll try to sort the comments into large buckets and then sort them into smaller buckets from there. And then run through them with fellow coaches, run through them with the leadership team, and try to just analyze them that way. Is it perfect? No, but anytime you're interpreting a large amount of that kind of data, that's kind of what you're stuck with.
I do have a question from our virtual group. How do you support psychological safety on teams that include developers and their managers?
Well, developers are people too. So, I'm not sure why that they would get singled out in this case. But developers are members of all the product teams in my organization as well. We have an entire engineering org, and they're part of this transformation. Do some of our developers have more challenging personality profiles that make this more difficult for them? Yes. Do we work with them individually when they want help? Yes. Are some of them still a problem? Yes. Doing the best we can. 2 questions right here.
So my survey again, what would you say your completion percentage for the surveys is, and then are they anonymous?
They are anonymous, 100% anonymous. We aim for 50%. Sometimes we get more. I know the enterprise survey, they aim for 80%, so that's actually very good. For our internal one, we aim for 50%, and we feel that that's pretty solid as well.
I just wanted to go back to the question online. It sounded to me like there was a psychological safety issue between a developer and a manager on the same team.
Oh.
Meaning that they can't talk smack about their manager while.
Oh, okay. So I heard a different question, but that's fine. Please.
Just to be open about, how you feel or where you're trying to move towards without feeling right. There's retaliation or the look, whatever. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's right. And I think one good thing that we just started doing last year as an entire enterprise which is everyone executive director and above gets a 360 review. And everyone, even at the director level, which would be most of our engineering managers, gets a 180 review. And then they review the results of those with a professional coach and try to develop a plan to improve their behaviors in response to whatever came out of the 180 or the 360. So that's still work in progress right now. But yeah, I mean, a lot of our managers need development and how to be better managers. And creating a psychologically safe environment is just part of it.
Manager feedback, they do have feedback that they want to give it to the team. How do you take that in and not make it like right? Yes.
Well, I mean, the thing I would try to tell people about feedback that you get about yourself is it's just data. And it's data that should be interesting because it is about you, but it isn't the only thing that defines you. It's just one piece of data or one group of data that can move you in another direction if you need to.
A manager wants to make a change, and as a scrum master, you want the manager to not tell the team what to do, but to suggest the change so that the team can then discuss it. Incorporate a manager's input to change.
Well, I mean, is the manager part of the retrospective? No.
I guess they should. I help for psychological safety.
Okay. Well, you know, if the manager has something that he wants the team to do in a certain way, they can just tell him that. But I think it's probably good for that manager and the team to have a conversation like, these are the things I'm seeing. These are the things I'd like to see. What do you guys think? You know, have a conversation rather than it be a laying down of the law. That would be helpful, very helpful. Back there in the middle.
Doesn't mean that it's just the way I was brought up. I just want to
100% agree. We are fortunate that most of the teams I work with are within the United States. Not all of them are. And yes, the cultural considerations are a big thing. We could spend a whole nother 45 minutes talking about that for sure.
I just have one more online question that I'd
Sure.
like to sneak in. I know we're a few minutes over. We have one person who was curious about what OKRs looked like.
Okay, that's another whole thing, but you know, your objective is your guiding thing that you want to do, the overarching, the why of what you're doing. And then your key results are some measurable thing that you're doing to achieve the objective.
I think she's got OKRs in general, but just the OKRs that you used that were related to psychological safety.
Oh,
for
okay.
the
So our key result
transformation.
related to psychological safety was really basic. It was everyone in the org will have had one psychological safety training during the year. Every manager will have had 2, and that was it for the year. We did not have one that assessed how well those trainings took.
Okay.
That's where the surveys come in. I know we're over time. Happy to talk at lunch with anyone else. So thank you.